Hey guys, how's it going? This week two, part two, reading The Secret Life of Groceries book. This week was a great read for me. Um, this really touched on an industry that's pretty close to my heart. So my family was built on trucking. I mean, my grandparents both drove trucks. My mom's driven trucks. My dad's driven trucks. I have uncles that drive trucks. Um, so fate would have it that my mom and dad both worked for the same company, and they were both drivers, like separately. And my mom used to drive as a team with my grandpa. And one day they were in the shop, and my mom saw this guy, which happened to be my dad, and started talking, and life started for them. They started driving as a team, and then things just kind of went from there, and life started for them. And here I am. I spent many summers growing up on the road with my dad, like, when school was out and whatnot. Um, One, I didn't have a whole lot to do during the summers, so my mom worked and we lived kind of in a neighborhood that wasn't a whole lot of kids around and whatnot. So, instead of kind of probably getting into trouble or whatever, I went on the road with my dad. So I've seen a lot. I went all over the United States in, the cab of a semi truck. Um, it was great times. Seen a lot of weird stuff and experienced some weird stuff, but made great memories and, would never do anything to trade them. And so being able to read this part of this book and be super relatable to a lot of what was being said um, was really kind of amazing. So much of it really hit the nail on the head, and especially because up into probably the late 90s, mid to late 90s, um, you know, my dad was always really fond of the trucking industry. I mean, he'd driven probably 40 to 50 years of his life. Um, and he had always told me, don't become a truck driver. Um, there was a part of me that was like, are you kidding me? Like, you're making good money, like things like that. And, so, but he saw the change that was coming. And he knew it was only going to be a matter of time till that industry kind of took a spiral down. And it really has. There are still some good stories, some good companies to work for, things like that. But you know, in the grand scheme of things, it is not what it used to be, and he saw that coming, from a mile away. So I'm glad that he spared me from having to experience that. Um, so it was good. So just to get back on topic here, we have to describe some factors that led to Lynn earning only the $100 per week. Um, so according to the first half of part two of The Secret Life of Groceries, which is so far been a great book, written by Benjamin Lorr, there were several things that amounted to Lynn only earning the $100 per week. Some of these things were unfortunately out of her control, like when she has to sit and wait at docks or wait in lines to get a dock assignment and burn her fuel. As she alluded to, these amounts of fees that just begin to add up each week is very hard to stay on top of. um, on page 89 in part two, she broke down some of the deductions that comes out of her check for us. The lease to own fees, which are paid weekly, no matter, what she makes. And sometimes it's not even enough to cover the full payment, but they still take what they can. And then whatever the balance is from that week, they just will add it on top of the following week. So what ends up happening is this just becomes a giant sum that she has to try to nip away at, but yet not get too far behind because then they can like cancel her contract and fire her and basically be like, you're done. Um, you're not getting a truck, you're fired, but yet she's still on the hook for the balance and things like that. So it makes it a vicious circle for them to like just stay on top of. And then that's, also saying that she doesn't have any mechanical issues where she gets put into more debt. Um, yeah, the company would cover it, but she's still got to pay for that balance, and it's going to come out each week out of her check. So then that just becomes another, you know, another bill coming out of the top of the check. Um, and she knows it's the hard truth because it is going to happen. It's only a matter of time. Things like, her weekly lease payment come out, the cleaning fee of the trailer, like she's talking about where she has to pay to have the trailer cleaned out, whether it's cleaned or not. Um, Sometimes that, depending on where you're at, I know from like personal experience, because I would clean out my dad's trailer, with usually a broom and then a blower or something like that. But sometimes, what happens is, especially now because of, just liability issues, some of these warehouses, they won't let you clean out your own trailer once they empty it. So they'll have a worker just coming around behind like the lumpers or whatever, and they'll clean the trailers out. But what happens is now that's a set fee that you don't get to negotiate or even do yourself. And so you're on the hook for paying whatever fee that is. And then, like I said, you got your lumper fees, which are the people that, unload the trailers for you. Um, you know, More times now than what used to be, you have to use a lumper, because of liability issues. So used to, you could opt to kind of hump your own load, which would be unloading your load. Um, but now a lot of places don't even allow you to do that, and so it's a mandatory thing that you have to use a lumper. Um, then you have the fuel charges, and just like us with cars, the fuel is outrageous, and it's even more outrageous for semi trucks. So, a lot of these costs are just out of her control, and it just adds up every week. And if she's not getting the loads and not getting the miles, she's not making money. Um, so it just becomes a larger debt for her. Um, so then moving on to the second half of part two, um, where it says, drives homes the idea that while we have a cheap food system, there are many additional costs beyond just the price tag on a box of cookies or whatnot. So that I would definitely agree with. Um, So, according to the information provided within the second half of the part two of the Secret Life of Groceries book, um, it does touch on some pretty dark issues. And I know from experience that a lot of these do happen, from stories, that like my mom has told me, and that even my grandma told me, that was kind of happening to her back in, even like the like 50s and 60s, as a female driver, these types of things are happening. It was not as, I would say, probably not as serious as it is now. It might be like some flirtation kind of stuff, or they might be looked down upon a little bit, or they might not, help be as quick to get help from a male trucker, as like a male trucker would be. So things like that. Now it's a lot more, um, sexist, I guess you could say, and, just a bit more violent. Um, and then the drugs definitely, they're there. As much as we would like to say they aren't, and that they are well regulated, by drug tests and things like that, um, things still happen. Some of these people are willing to take these drugs to get to that next, you know, appointment or whatever, because in their eyes, the money they would make to get to that appointment is kind of worth the risk of maybe losing that job. As weird as that is to say. Um, but when you're living on $100 a week and hey, if I can make two more of these jobs this week, and I can get $500 for the week, risk versus benefit there. Um, so like I said, especially the female drivers, just the stuff that they go through just to get the products to us is, it's very demanding. It's very hard. The sexual assault that they have to put up with, sometimes even, sexual battery, is just a big issue. And unfortunately, it kind of does get brushed off by some of the companies, that are operating nowadays. and that's according, obviously to the interviewer, between the interviews between Benjamin and Lynn. Um, just things happen. It gets brushed under the rug, or it gets blamed on the woman, and it's easier for the company to kind of push the woman aside, or end up kind of running her off or whatnot, so that they don't have to deal with these issues, because those issues cost money. And at the end of the day, these companies do not want to spend an extra dime on anything. Um, and they, also touched base on some of the drug issues and stuff, things like that. And they also touched a little bit on just the unhealthy habits as far as diet. And that's a big thing. So on page 96, it is stated that from around 1935 to the 80s, trucking was considered a middle class job. Transportation was very tightly regulated and very stable, and it provided a very respectable income. I would attest to that, and I know, like, when my father was driving, up to the late 90s, I mean, he made a really good living at it. We we were doing pretty well. Um, but he also always told me too, don't get into trucking. And I'm glad that he did, because he saw these problems coming like miles and miles in advance. He knew that trucking was going to start taking a downward spiral, because he was seeing the way some of these bigger companies were coming up, and they were swallowing up these mom and pop, you know, operations. So it was kind of losing its lore, it was losing its camaraderie, and starting to bring in just lower level, like, just, I don't really know how to explain it, but just lower level people. Um, as is alluded to in the book on page 94. Um, once 80s, 90s come, the price of transport was starting to drop, and a few years later, now truckers are some of the lowest possible wages paid for labor. Um, and that change that we were talking about was talked about on page 94, and that's when recruiters were starting to go out and find, um, basically, like, people from homeless shelters, you know, soup kitchens, recovery wards, which are basically like drug rehabs, work release programs with, like halfway houses where they were just released from prison, minimum wage jobs, construction jobs, where these recruiters are like, hey, these people are down and out. And they would promise them like these guaranteed jobs that sounded so great. They didn't require any experience. They had fantastic pay in exchange for dropping their old lives. So they'd be like, hey, you're making $9 an hour, you know, using a shovel to dig a ditch. We can make 15 times that driving a semi and be your own boss. So of course, to these people, this sounds amazing. Um, but they're basically just selling these people on jobs that really didn't exist. Um, so I think that's pretty sad, because we don't think about stuff like that. So at the end of the day, these trucking companies are taking really bad advantage of people that are just down and out on their luck. And they're doing it just so that we can get our goods delivered to us, um, for maybe a little bit of a cheaper price. But, like, if you look at the price of groceries right now, I would hate to see, what's happening on these, companies' books, because these prices are outrageous, man. Um, so the fact that, like, what we're paying, and then you have truck drivers that are just barely getting by, but yet they're the ones that are feeding everyone, just, it's very lopsided. Um, so anyways, these truckers, they're the ones help us get our goods, that we use for like meal prepping and putting healthy food in for our kids and whatnot. And at the end of the day, they're the ones that are probably least healthy. They're eating just, snack cakes. They're eating just food on the go that is not healthy. One, because they don't have the time to stop and enjoy a good meal, and two, they don't have the money. It's not feasible for them. So, you know, at the end of the day, I just want to say we need to thank these people as much as we can, and maybe once in a while, just if you see them out, just tell them thanks. Um, give them a little extra room on the road. It goes a long way. Um, because they're highly stressed and they definitely deserve a bit more respect. And you know, I just think that's about where we're at with this trucking industry. And I could probably go on much longer and have much more crazy stories and funny ones too, but this ain't the time nor the place. Um, but anyways, I hope you guys like my discussion, and I'm sorry if it drug out a little too much. But anyways, appreciate you guys listening. Talk to you later.